Everybody, we're going to get rolling. So nice of all of you to come. My name is Kara Feldman-Hunt. I'm the director of the Osher Center for Integrative Health. And this is our second Whole Health Connect. So we're very excited. And this drew a large crowd. So excited to hear what you both have to say. But we're especially excited because Cynthia is our very first Osher Center research, we don't know, scientist. So it is a collaboration with Bob Bramley and the Conversation Lab. And so just thrilled to kind of see this come to fruition and excited to hear your talk. So, and our next Whole Health Connect is December 10th. Thank you so much. Great.
Thank you. Hi everyone, thank you so much for joining us here today. Can you hear me okay, or do you need a microphone? Okay. We're excited to present some of our preliminary findings from this study about integrating meaning and psilocybin-assisted therapy. Our study really sought to identify coda moments and understand them in the integration sessions following psilocybin-assisted therapy for people with cancer and depression. Data from this study is from an approved clinical trial in partnership with Sunstone Therapies, which is based in Maryland. My name is Cynthia Peterson, and as Kara introduced me, I'm a research scientist and a nurse scientist. I work with the Vermont Conversation Lab and an Osher Center affiliate and researcher here.
And my name is Anisha Zafish. I'm a third-year public health major at UVM, and I'm a research assistant for the Vermont Conversation Lab.
We have no conflicts of interest to disclose, and this study's been approved by the University of Vermont IRB. And like I said, we're partnered with Sunstone Therapies in Maryland for our data, and they continue to do clinical trials exploring safe use for psychedelic therapies. The objectives for today are to first introduce you to psychedelic therapy and describe how it's done in a clinical trial setting. We'll also explain what Codas are and why we think that they matter for integration of the psychedelic experience. And we'll share with you our study design, our methods, and our preliminary insights. I want to start by acknowledging that psychedelic healing is not new. Indigenous communities around the world have worked with these medicines for thousands of years, long before modern science began studying them. As Lisa Macias-Redbear reminds us, we can't start history of psychedelics in the 60s in the Americas. That needs to stop. We, Indigenous people, use this medicine before Jesus walked this earth. These practices are not new, and they still are. These practices were and they still are rooted in holistic worldviews, healing our bodies, minds, spirits, and community. Today, we're exploring psychedelic-assisted therapy in a clinical context, and it's important to honor these ancestral roots and recognize that our understanding is built on generational knowledge. The current psychedelic renaissance often overlooks these deep cultural origins, so we want to hold respect and gratitude as we move forward in research and care. Today, our presentation is focusing on the context of clinical trial protocols that will guide modern regulatory bodies' decisions about the availability of psychedelic substances in U.S. healthcare.
So psychedelic-assisted therapy, which we'll refer to as PAT, is a therapeutic approach that combines psychedelic substances with structured psychotherapy to promote emotional healing, insight, and behavior change. Our study focuses on psilocybin, the active component in what is commonly known as magic mushrooms. The model we will be describing today might be considered a modern biomedical model for PAT, which is used in clinical trials. This is to ensure enough uniformity when presented to the FDA. During this trial, hosted by Sunstone Therapies, participants with both cancer and depression were given psilocybin in an effort to better understand psilocybin-assisted therapy. Cohorts of 3 to 4 participants were enrolled in the study and completed 8 visits within the duration of 8 weeks. Each participant was paired with an assigned therapist. The therapist and the participant underwent 2 preparation sessions, 1 dosing session during which psilocybin was received, and 2 integration sessions. Here are some photos of the space where psilocybin was received and the clinical space where the trial occurred. The space is designed to be comforting and inviting for the experience. The physical setting, as well as the mental intention, were considered set and setting for this trial. For our research, we focus on integration 1 and integration 2. These 2 visits occurred the day after dosing and the day after dosing, respectively. The format of integration was the participant and the therapist discussing and integrating the psychedelic experience.
We like to play a short video clip, less than a minute, to give you an idea of what this therapy entails in the clinical trial setting.
Who are we? We usually think of our egos, our everyday personalities, but I know that there is more within the consciousness. We don't even know what consciousness is yet, but we know there is such a thing because we all report it and experience it. You think you're alone and isolated. You have very constricted consciousness. You've forgotten who you are. When consciousness wakes up, you discover you are so much more than that individual ego that scampers around the world. We are all connected.
We just wanted to share that to give you a little flavor of sort of the visual of how, you know, a participant and therapist support and kind of what it looks like in the setting. So first we want to talk about Codas. What is a Coda? Why do we call it that? And why do they matter? The term comes from narrative analysis, where a Coda traditionally signals the end of a story and brings the listener back to the present moment, essentially answering the question, and what happened then? In psilocybin-assisted therapy, there you go. Right? In psilocybin-assisted therapy, integration sessions aren't a single neat story. They're more like a tapestry. Participants are weaving together strands of their past experience, and within this weaving, we find coda moments that act as anchors of meaning. These moments may feel like a pause or a breath when the person reflects on what their experience is. And as the integration process continues and unfolds, we're noticing how participants are bringing together the threads of their stories and their experiences into a more coherent whole. Our team has been working hard to define what codas mean in PAT. And so we've come to the definition that a coda represents a moment where the person expresses consideration for the meaning or the significance of the PAT experience. And why does this matter? Why do codas matter? Through our work, we believe that codas may serve as anchors in the meaning-making process. People obviously have these very rich, very deep experiences. How are they making meaning from it? These codas help participants integrate their psychedelic insights into everyday life, and they can really highlight emotional processing, meaning, and significance.
Right, so before we dive deeper into codas later in the presentation, I want to give you a quick example so you can get a feel for what we're talking about with codas. This quote comes from one participant who said, "My body, my whole life, has been something you have to overcome. My body was integral to my mind." She realizes that her mind and body are connected, and because of that, there is no need to escape one or the other. Acceptance serves as a major theme within her codas. For her, it was important to let go of old beliefs and shed those ideas. What's happening here is a moment of reflection, a shift in how this person sees themselves. That's a big change in perspective, and it's exactly the kind of meaning that we're looking for in a coda. Later in the presentation, we'll unpack more examples of codas and how they connect to the integration process. Our study question was, how can coda moments in psychedelic-assisted therapy integration sessions be defined and characterized based on their observable features? We really sought to identify and characterize coda moments in integration sessions post-PAT experience. We're curious about the moments where insights seem to emerge and the threads of a participant's story are really woven together to form a coherent takeaway. We wanted to know, what do these moments look like and how can we spot them in the data based on observable features? For our study design, we had a team of 4 coders to double code a total of 20 integration session videos. This consisted of 2 integration videos for each of 10 participants. This was approximately 20 hours of video footage total. Double coding allowed us to capture patterns and ensure consistency in identifying coda moments and allowed our team to begin narrowing down what we were seeing in the data.
Here's a picture, I know you can't read it, of our code book structure. We developed this codebook through an iterative process. We're mostly trying to understand what we could identify and measure in relation to the concepts of Codas in psychedelic therapy. So, for example, as we began to conceptualize Coda moments, we noticed how participants were reflecting or verbalizing a lesson learned or a new insight. These characteristics are included on our codebook, and each of these elements were defined. We had a long definition guide so that our coders would have a reference of what we intended to include. Coders would first identify the Coda moment, including start time, end time, and how confident they were that this moment met our definition. So they had high, moderate, or low confidence levels. And then coders characterized the moment by checking off each of the observable features. So if you looked at our coding sheets, there'd be a bunch of check marks, or maybe less check marks. So that's how we organized ourselves. The codebook implementation process, we did come across some characteristics that we felt were kind of ambiguous or challenging. Particularly, one example is direct address, which we originally thought was really important when a participant was like verbalizing something and directly addressing, which we thought, I think originally that it would maybe be to the therapist, but then we found people were directly addressing themselves and someone in their lives or like an inanimate object, and it became kind of confusing for us as we started coding that. So that's an example of something that was kind of ambiguous that we refined a little bit and said, no, we only want it to be if they're directly addressing the therapist in the integration session. The other thing that we found was that some characteristics were coming up more or less often. So for example, we saw a lot of reflection, lessons learned, acceptance, relief, and joy, and a lot less of the direct address characteristic or repetition, like someone saying the same words or the same thing over and over, or even anger, like we didn't see those features as much. So we used all this knowledge as we were going through this process to adapt our codebook to further refine some of these concepts and either remove some features or expand the features so that we could have a really clear process for going through the videos. Another example of a concept we refined was emotional resolution versus emotional processing. We just felt like as someone is trying to integrate their experience, we don't necessarily expect them to feel emotionally resolved about it, have emotional resolution. We reclassified that as emotional processing. So through our initial review of high confidence Coda moments, remember we had the high confidence, moderate, and low. These are from high confidence Coda moments. We found high levels of some interesting observable features such as symbolic language, connection to nature or the universe, a sense of relief, a sense of acceptance, or a sense of joy. And we want to kind of zone in on these observable features for you with some participant quotes, which we hope you'll find interesting, and we'll explain why these are Coda moments.
All right, so the first Coda that we want to discuss relates to vulnerability and acceptance, and includes features of connection to nature and symbolism. When you see your body open like that, you know that's true because you've seen those things. It's like I was in a cocoon and it just opened up. You're kind of like, it's okay to be hurt, it's okay to have injuries and stuff. This is a clear example of a Coda. The participant is really working through what their experience means. They use this powerful cocoon metaphor of transformation, like they've opened up and revealed everything they came in with. This quote continues with the sense of feeling both exposed and protected at the same time, which is a big shift in perspective for this participant. They come to the realization that it's okay to be hurt, it's okay to have injuries. That's how acceptance can show up in a Coda moment, acknowledging and accepting where someone is at currently, and that it's okay to be where they are. This Coda pertains to affirmation and protection while using symbolic language. It was an affirmation that was confirming that to me in my mind, that confirmed that when I was thinking of the devil and the angels, my whitefish were always there, and my fish came and always covered the darkness, always. This is another example of Coda. Here, the participant is making sense of their experience using a deeply personal spiritual framework. They talk about the whitefish and blackfish. Whitefish as angels and protectors, Blackfish as darkness or the devil. In this Coda moment, what's powerful is how they frame this experience as an affirmation. My fish came and always come to the darkness. That tells us they're interpreting the experience as reassurance, feeling protected and supported.
This next coda is about letting go of stories. I really enjoyed reading this and witnessing this participants' process, and they really showed a great sense of relief when we were characterizing this coda moment. So they said, it was a cascade of stories. It was the infinite possibilities of all stories that could ever exist. No story was good or bad. Letting them go, letting go of all of the things that I had been attached to, the stories that I had been attached to really let them go. It was really like a big let go. And there was this realization that when we are so much stuck in our own little story, we just miss the music. We just miss the symphony because we just get one note, right? This participant is describing standing in front of a cascade of stories, and they were kind of like describing, I could pick a story. But really realizing that none of the stories are good or bad, they're just stories. And that realization brought them a huge sense of relief. They described here in this quote and furthermore in the video about the act of shedding the stories, and that really shows an insight in an embodied way. And that what really also stands out here is this metaphor at the end, that when we're stuck in our own story, our own little story, we can miss the music and we can miss the symphony. So in reflecting on this, we're really feeling like this coda moves us from a personal transformation about shedding our stories into more of a universal truth about missing the music. And it's a really powerful way to express this new insight. It's about letting go of shame and attachment so that we can experience the fullness of life. This next coda occurs at the end of a letter to self, which participants were encouraged to write in the study. I'm going to read the full letter. This quote comes at the end and actually wasn't really part of the letter. It was the reflection after it. And I'm going to substitute a name. Dearest Amy, my hope for you is that your journey continues and teaches you many things. Figure it as an adventure in the Amazonian jungle, life-giving, rich in providing you all you'll ever need, a place you can grow and just be. Go into that verdant space often. Move toward your fears, however scary they may seem. Embrace the wisdom and lessons they bring you so you can continue to evolve mind, body, and spirit, especially spirit. Be curious and spontaneous. Dance, cry, vomit, sing, rejoice. This participant earlier describes the significance of vomiting and how it was tied to a childhood trauma. Her ability to embrace this in her letter to herself shows a transformation that has occurred as she accepts all of who she is. And after reading her letter, she begins to cry a bit, and she says this quote, she says, "This is such amazing self-love. I've never been able to love myself as much as I do right now." Makes me terrible because I'm like thinking of just like how amazing it was, but just be with love that surpasses all time me. So I just want to honor that. But this coda is a very powerful moment. The participants really reflecting on what the experience means for them. And they're using this beautiful metaphor of an Amazonian jungle and kind of like life's abundant possibilities and this emotional peak of just being themselves. And it's a great example of radical self-love and acceptance. Our last coda example is about experiencing oneness and wholeness with some observable features of joy and a connection to nature. Life just took on greater meaning, for lack of a better word. Like colors are richer and my plants have more energy and I feel more at one with plants and vegetation and really everything, all living things. It feels like a oneness and a sort of wholeness, and plants can really provide for almost all of our needs. This is a great example of a coda because the participant is actively considering the meaning and significance of their psychedelic experience, and they're describing a big shift, a sense that life feels richer, more purposeful. They're feeling more at one with plants, really everything, all living things. And just to notice the language of interconnectedness, the oneness and the wholeness. And we see that in other examples too, but we just wanted to pull out a few in particular for you all. This participant later goes on to describe how the plants are dancing and she's dancing with the plants, especially when she's in her garden. And then she also describes having this feeling of an energy around her, particularly around her crown or her head, that she describes as white, bold, colorful light. And that she's really, in this moment, embodying, a sense of joy, this Coda moment. So these are some examples that we pulled to share with you all about Coda moments. Our limitations for this were that it was a small pilot study, but it helped us refine a method for coding Codas. We want to acknowledge that there was an underrepresentation of cultural diversity in our sample, and we're only looking at high confidence Coda moments currently. We've also not yet analyzed inter-rater reliability for the overlap moments in the coding. But in our next steps, we're going to address some of those things. So our next steps for this study will be to implement our newest phase of our codebook with 15 participants who each have 2 videos, so 30 videos total. Our coding team is 3 to 4 people and we double code every video. We'll be looking at inter-rater reliability of the overlap moments. We're planning to build a taxonomy of Codas, and we're going to be discovering the language markers of Codas. Here's a representation of our next steps to look further into the language markers that signal a coda. We've already noticed that when we're coding for Codas, we're seeing language that moves beyond just describing the experience, which is obviously very interesting and cool, but moving from describing it to actually interpreting what does it mean. You'll often hear reflective phrases like I realized, or it means, or that was confirming. And we also are noticing symbolic language or metaphors are another big clue, like I was in a cocoon or cascade of stories or missing symphony. There's also temporal language that signals a shift in time or perspective, which may also be future oriented. Integrative language, and we're interested in that too. That type of language may signal action or behavior change or intention to change by bringing those integrative insights into the person's everyday life. So those are things we are interested in that we're planning to look at more closely in the next phase. Here's another part of our next steps will be to evaluate the inter-rater reliability for identifying Coda moments. This is an example of kind of what that essentially looks like. So you can see the orange segments above the blue segments on a couple of spots there. And those are moments where there's coding overlap of time in the video, where, we both are, and our coding team identified this Coda moment started here and ended here, and we both had some overlap of what we thought the Coda moment was. And a notable quote from this first Coda moment was where I was where I wanted to be, actually present in nature. So we'll be taking a deeper dive in this in our next phase of this project. That came out a little funny. We want to thank Sunstone Therapies for partnering with the Vermont Conversation Lab on this study. We want to thank all study volunteers. We want to appreciate our study team members, Anusha, Satish, Milo Clary, myself, and Bob Gramling, who's here too. And this work was funded by grants from the National Science Foundation and also the University of Vermont Osher Center. Thank you very much. I know we have time for questions, and we expect you might have some.
Thank you.